Hello again, and welcome to Aviation News Talk, where we talk general aviation with relevant news and flying tips for pilots and student pilots to help keep you safe. I'm Max Truscott. Today, a 13-year-old listener provides a list of 30 ways to save money on flight training. And we'll be talking with Kevin Meyers of PilotEdge about SimVenture 2021, which is an opportunity for pilots and flight simmers to experience what it's like to fly with a mass of other airplanes on the way to AirVenture in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Last week in episode 190, we talked with Seth Lake about the NTSB's probable cause for a King Air 350 crash that killed 10 people in 2019 in Addison, Texas. So if you didn't hear that episode, you may want to check it out. And I'd like to ask for your help. There are two things that you can do to help us out. One, please go ahead and leave a 5-star review in whatever podcast app that you're listening to us now. And two, please consider sharing this show with a friend. Just click on the share button in whatever app you're listening to and let them know about Aviation News Talk. Thanks so much for your help with this. This week in the news, Garmin wins the 2020 Collier Trophy. And NAV Canada gets called out for something they did during the pandemic. And a rare subsonics jet crashes. All this and more, and the news starts now. From Flying Magazine, Garmin wins the 2020 Collier Trophy for Autoland. The world's first autonomous landing system for light aircraft secures aviation's top prize. On June 3rd, the National Aeronautical Association, or NAA, announced that Garmin's Autoland system has won the 2020 Robert J. Collier Trophy, demonstrating the greatest achievement in aeronautics or astronautics in America with respect to improving the performance, efficiency, and safety of air or space vehicles, the value of which has been thoroughly demonstrated by actual use during the preceding year. The Collier Trophy dates back to 1911, and it honors in 2020 the designing, developing, and fielding of Garmin Autoland, the world's first certified autonomous system that activates during an emergency to safely control and land an aircraft without human intervention, according to the NAA press release. Other contenders for the award eliminate the tough competition for 2020. They included the Bell V-280 Valor, Boeing's Confident Travel Initiative, Reliable Robotics Remotely Operated Aircraft System, or ROAS, SpaceX's Falcon 9 and Dragon 2, the U.S. Air Force Green Propellant Infusion Mission Team, and Yates Electrospace Corporation's Silent Arrow. NAA Chairman Jim Albaugh said the Garmin Autoland system marks a significant improvement in civil aviation. Its ability to take over an airplane with a disabled pilot and land it safely will save many lives in the future. It's a remarkable technical achievement and clearly merits the Collier Trophy. Garmin worked in concert with partners at several aircraft OEMs to bring the system to life, including the first FAA certification with Piper Aircraft's M600 SLS Halo, the first EASA certification with Daher's TBM 940 HomeSafe, and the first jet certification in Cirrus Aircraft's VisionJet Safe Return. And of course, we've talked about Autoland a lot on this show. I was lucky enough to be invited to Garmin's headquarters when they announced Autoland back on October 30th of 2019. And if you want to check out our episodes 127 and 128, we've got interviews with Garmin engineers who worked on Garmin Autoland. From FlightDesign.com, the ctls 914T with intercooler announced. Flight Design is pleased to announce the availability of the 914T, which would be the turbo version of the ctls GT 2020. The ctls GT with the turbocharged Rotax 914 and larger intercooler system greatly improves the climb rate, cruise speed, and high-altitude performance on Flight Design's most popular model. Daniel Gunther, Managing Director of Flight Design's General Aviation Group, said, "We are very excited to finish development of this new variant of the ctls GT. The design team did a beautiful job integrating the Rotax 914 with the turbocharger and intercooler into the new longer cowling of the ctls GT 2020. With a large NACA inlet and the custom-welded aluminum piping, the engine compartment is just a thing of beauty. The ctls GT Turbo incorporates all the new features of the GT 2020 model, including the longer, more attractive cowling, with improved cooling and cabin heating, new spinner, and new low-drag wheel pants for improved performance. Equipped with a full Garmin avionics suite, including dual G3X screens, the ctls GT is a thoroughly modern aircraft that can reach 140 knots and climbs at over 2,000 feet a minute. Now that's very impressive for a light sport design. Flight design test pilot Nico Stambula said the ctls GT Turbo climbs like a rocket and very easily reaches 140 knots at altitude. The engine cools well, and it is a very smooth flying package. The first plane is going to an owner in South Africa, where they have both hot and high altitude conditions. The plane should be just great for operating there. And I must say, of all the light sport aircraft, the flight design is one of my favorite. Years ago, I had an opportunity to fly the ctls, and I thought it was just a great aircraft model. From military.com, civilian trained pilots may get a leg up in Air Force career through a new program. 33 aspiring Air Force pilots with prior flight experience that they got as civilians have joined a new program that may allow them to jump ahead in training. The service's Civil Path to Wings program has approved pilot candidates from active duty Air National Guard and Reserve units, graduates from the Reserve Officer Training Corps, and civilian applicants aspiring to earn their Air Force wings, according to Air Education and Training Command, or AETC. In an effort to become military aviators, the candidates will be put through a training program tailor-made to their needs. The program is set to begin later this year, though a start date was not specified. The program applies only to fixed-wing and heavy aircraft, such as the C-17 Globemaster III mobility aircraft. Those who wish to fly fighter jets still must attend traditional undergraduate pilot training, or UPT. It's not a waiver program. Candidates who volunteer for the program have their flying skills validated by the 19th Air Force and are then placed in training programs applicable to their skill sets. The hope is to accelerate their training in the aviation pipeline, since it builds off their prior flight background. Applicants are screened on a set of demonstrated piloting skills, along with written and oral exams. Once screened, the best candidates will receive training appropriate to their skill level in an Air Force-approved course. Students learn general aviation abilities in the classroom and then head straight into the T-1 Jayhawk, finishing in roughly 7 months instead of the traditional 12 months. The first accelerated Path to Wings class graduated 7 airmen on March 12th. In March, Major General Craig Wills, the 19th Air Force commander, said the service wants to usher in a more diverse group of pilots on a shorter timeline. While the Air Force is developing more personalized programs directed at streamlining training for incoming pilots through virtual reality and simulation, it's also looking to outsource some training to private industry in an attempt to churn out 1,500 new pilots a year. The Air Force fell short of that goal, first set in 2018, in fiscal 2020 producing only 1,263 pilots. In fiscal 2020, the Air Force came up 1,925 pilots short of the roughly 21,000 pilots it needs overall. From avweb.com, United orders Boom Supersonic airliners. United Airlines has signed an agreement with Boom Supersonic to purchase 15 Overture supersonic airliners once the model meets United's safety, operating, and sustainability requirements. The deal also includes options for 35 additional aircraft. Boom is partnering with Rolls-Royce on a propulsion system for the Overture, which is expected to fly at speeds up to Mach 1.7. United CEO Scott Kirby said United continues on its trajectory to build a more innovative, sustainable airline, and today's advancements in technology are making it more viable for that to include supersonic planes. As previously reported by AvWeb, Boom rolled out its XB-1 supersonic demonstrator, which was designed to demonstrate key technologies for the Overture model in October 2020. Boom was planning to fly the Overture for the first time in 2026 and hopes to have it enter service in 2029. According to the company, the aircraft will be optimized to run on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. In international news, this comes from cbc.ca, MPs, or members of parliament, call on NAV Canada to give up $7 million in bonuses paid out during the pandemic. Politicians are calling on executives and management at NAV Canada to pay back $7 million in bonuses they received last year during the pandemic, while the private nonprofit was tapping into government aid and issuing layoff notices. Opposition MPs told the CBC News that they want the company, which owns and operates Canada's air traffic control system, to follow Air Canada's lead. The airline announced yesterday its senior executives will give back their 2020 bonuses in response to public disappointment. It's very frustrating, said Conservative MP Michael Crom, who sits on the House of Commons Transport Committee. If the Air Canada executives can make the right steps in the right direction to pay back some of their bonuses, I don't see why NAV Canada can't pay back their bonuses as well. Public outrage flared last week after the Globe and Mail reported Air Canada gave corporate executives and managers $10 million in COVID-19 pandemic mitigation bonuses, along with other stock awards, while the company negotiated with the federal government for a multi-billion-dollar pandemic aid package. Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Christia Freeland increased the pressure on Air Canada Wednesday by calling the bonuses inappropriate. NAV Canada said it won't decide until the fall whether it will hand out bonuses for 2021. When asked repeatedly by CBC News if company executives will pay back the bonuses from 2020, NAV Canada did not answer directly. Instead, company spokesperson Michael Boudreau defended their management incentive program, saying it was reduced significantly last year by 20%. Quote, last year cuts were made to our management compensation, pension plans, and incentive programs, as well as a significant reduction to overall management staffing numbers, including the executive management team, to reflect the challenging financial environment, Boudreau said in a media statement sent to CBC News. NAV Canada saw profits in air traffic plummet over the past year as the pandemic battered the industry, prompting some 720 jobs lost among roughly 5,200 employees since March, plus another 180 announced in December. Roughly 30 air traffic safety electronics personnel were laid off, according to the union. The union said NAV Canada said it needed to roll back negotiated wages or face deeper cuts. Doug Best, president of the Canadian Air Traffic Control Association, told CBC that his organization is concerned about the poor quality of decisions being made and the bad faith environment in which they are being made. The original decision to pay bonuses was done in bad faith, he said. Whether the decision is made to give the money back like Air Canada or not does not change the fact that they were paid at the same time they were laying off employees, all the while taking government handouts. And of course, air traffic in Canada is run by a private firm. We talked about privatization of air traffic control back in episode 54, so you might want to check that out. From avweb.com, upside-down trim tabs cited in fatal Navajo crash. The NTSB says improperly installed trim tabs were a factor in the crash of a Piper Navajo in Myrtle Beach last May 21st. A preliminary report issued said investigators found the trim tabs were installed upside down and backwards during an annual inspection completed 2 days before the flight. All the control surfaces had been removed and repainted during the annual. The flight was a post-maintenance hop from Myrtle Beach International to Grand Strand Airport in North Myrtle Beach. The aircraft crashed in a field and was consumed by a post-crash fire. The tanks were filled with 167 gallons of 100 low lead before the flight. The pilot, who was an ATP reportedly working for American Airlines, took off and almost immediately told ATC he needed to return to the airport. About a minute after takeoff, the controller asked if he needed help, and the pilot replied, "Yes, we're in trouble here." While turning for the downwind, the aircraft reached 1,000 feet AGL, dropped 475 feet, climbed to 700 feet, and then dropped from radar at 450 feet. And while I've heard stories in the past of ailerons that have been reversed, I've never heard a story about trim tabs that were installed improperly. So one more thing to check for carefully on your pre-flight, especially after maintenance. From GeneralAviationNews.com, plane hits deer 2 times in 3 weeks. The pilot reported that during the landing roll at an airport in Philippine, Arkansas, 3 deer ran from right to left across the runway. He felt a hard strike on the inboard section of the Piper PA-32R's right wing, saw a deer roll over the right wing, and felt a sensation of the right landing gear as it ran over a second deer. The pilot was able to maintain control of the airplane and taxi to the ramp without further incident. The aircraft sustained substantial damage to the right wing. The pilot and passenger had to get out of the airplane through the rear baggage door due to damage to the cabin door. After getting out of the plane, the pilot noticed copious amounts of fuel pouring from the damaged wing. The pilot reported that there were no pre-accident mechanical failures or malfunctions with the airplane that would have precluded normal operation. The pilot added that this was the second deer strike the airplane experienced in the prior 3 weeks, and airport management was aware of the situation. The FAA's chart supplement, the South Central U.S. page for the accident airport, in part states wildlife on and in vicinity of the airport. The probable cause from the NTSB, the airplane's collision with deer during the landing, and the airport's failure to provide an adequate barrier to prevent wildlife from entering the runway, despite prior deer strikes. And this certainly reminds me of one of my very first flights as a private pilot, taking a friend of mine flying, and after we landed, he said, "Wow, we came really close to that deer." And I said, "What deer?" And so I was so focused on the landing, I didn't even notice the deer. So one more thing to be aware of, especially in the early morning hours and late at night as you're flying. And finally, from planeandpilotmag.com, 1 dead in a crash of Subsonic's minijet in Louisiana. A Shreveport, Louisiana man was killed when his single-seat Subsonic's JSX microjet crashed into Shreveport's Cross Lake this past weekend. The pilot and sole occupant, Fred Phillips, 73, president of an energy company, died in the crash, which also destroyed the small jet when it impacted the water in front of a number of witnesses. The NTSB is investigating. The Subsonics is a jet built from a kit manufactured by Sonics Aircraft. The engine that powers it is a 25-pound thrust turbine manufactured by PBS Velka Bytes of the Czech Republic. Philips Sonics was serial number 6 and had been registered with the FAA since December of 2020. The airplane had made several short sorties over the past month. This last one lasted just 90 minutes, and there were no reported distress calls prior to the crash. Phillips was critically injured in a home explosion in Colorado in 2019, suffering serious burn injuries and spending months in the hospital. His life partner, Electra Churchill, was killed in the blast. Phillips was a longtime pilot and philanthropist known for his general support of the communities in which he lived. The NTSB is investigating the Shreveport crash. And of course, the Subsonics is a kit-built aircraft. When I looked, last data said that there were 11 of them that were currently flying. I saw one years ago when it was first introduced at AirVenture in Oshkosh. And of course, it's a rather unique single-engine kit with a jet engine on the top of the aircraft and just a single seat. Well, that's news for this week. Coming up next, we'll be talking about 30 ways you can save money in flight training, and then we'll be talking with PilotEdge about SimVenture 2020. All right here on the Aviation News Talk podcast. And now let's talk about 30 ways to save money on flight training. This all got started back when I got a rather interesting email in February from a young man named Dag. Dag wrote, "I'm a big fan of your show and have enjoyed it quite a bit. I can't fly legally and I'm only 13 years old, but enjoy learning as much as I can to be ready for when I do learn to fly. I've made a game about flying planes in World War I," and he provides a link to it, "and was wondering what I need to do to have you mention it on the show. Thanks so much for the podcast." I replied, "I generally avoid talking about GoFundMe or other projects people are using to raise money for themselves, as that just benefits one person, and my mission here is to share information that can make people better pilots and hopefully save a life. But it occurred to me that many teenagers and even adults are in a similar position to you, where they're looking for ways to raise money to fund flying lessons. So let me ask you to do this. Do some research online and find various ways that other teens or young adults are currently using to raise money for flying lessons. Try to find real people doing real things, list their names and how they might be contacted." And so Dag wrote back, "I would be happy to look into ways that people have tried and are trying to raise money for flight school. I will admit I hadn't exactly thought about how to raise money for flight school until you brought it up in your email. It'll be very interesting to research and I will report back to you." Well, 3 months went by and I just heard back from Dag, and before I get into his response, let me tell you briefly about his board game. It's called Dogfights, and the description says it's a 2-player dogfight set in World War I. Fly us up with Camel or a Fokker triplane in a battle for the sky. And like all board games, it comes with a board and pieces. It's about $36, and you can find it at thegamecrafter.com/dogfights, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And so here's Dag's response. Not only did he come up with a list of 30 ways to pay for flight training, but he also interviewed a corporate pilot about how he learned to fly, and I'll play part of his interview in a moment. But first, here are Dag's 30 ways to pay for your flight training or keep your flight training cost lower. Number 1, work at a flight school. And he mentions employee discounts. So yes, at some flight schools, employees get discounts on flight training and aircraft rental, so that's certainly a possibility. And I will tell you this, even if you're getting paid about the same or maybe even slightly less that you might get working at a fast food job or something like that, the great thing about working at a flight school is you're going to immerse yourself in aviation. You'll learn a lot from the experience of working there. You'll also get a lot of valuable connections and relationships that will help you become a better pilot. So working at a flight school is a great idea. Number 2, hang out around hangars and help out. So as you're wandering around the airport, if you see an open hangar door and someone's inside, perhaps working on an airplane, say hello, strike up a conversation. There may be ways that you can help. You can certainly learn from helping them inside the hangar, and you might even get a free ride or two at some point down the road. So definitely get friendly with people that you see around the airport. Number 3, become a Civil Air Patrol cadet. Now, the Civil Air Patrol has a program for teenagers, and at many locations, they also offer inexpensive flight training programs for cadets and other people who are members of the squadron. So check out the Civil Air Patrol at your local airport. Number 4, scholarships. Now, the best place to go to find out more about scholarships would be just to Google these words, scholarships, Carl with a C, Valeri, V-A-L-E-R-I. Carl offers an online source of scholarships for $10 a year. You can see the hundreds of aviation scholarships that are listed. Carl, by the way, also offers career coaching. So if you're looking to become an airline pilot, you might want to work with him to get coaching for your airline interview. Number 5, save money. And to that I would add, try and save up the full amount that you're going to need for flight training before you start the training. A big mistake that some people make, and this costs them a lot of money, is that they will get started with flight training before they have all the money they're going to need to complete their private certificate. And then perhaps halfway through the training, they run out of money. They may have to wait 6 months or a year before they can start training again. And of course, they will have forgotten a lot in that time, and they're going to have to repeat some training. So very expensive to have to stop training only to restart it again at a later time. So tip number 5, save money, get the full amount you need before you start your flight training. Number 6, get a job at the airport. There are all kinds of jobs at the airport, not just at the flight school, any of which could lead you to networking with the right people who might have some type of connection regarding flight training. Many pilot hopefuls start out as people refueling aircraft, working on the line, doing other tasks, maybe even washing airplanes. Just being around aviation can give you the opportunity to meet people who are going to be willing to help you in various ways. Number 7, get a federal Pell Grant. Now, you can only apply for this if you are attending a university while you're doing flight training. But the great thing about a Pell Grant is you don't have to pay it back. Number 8, AOPA flight training financing. So you can get a loan to help pay for your flight training. Of course, you will have to pay it back with interest. Number 9, create a GoFundMe. So there are different ways to go to Kickstarter and things like that to create sites where people can donate money to help you. Number 10, get a side hustle, some type of job you can do on the side to make more money. Number 11, study ahead of time, which will minimize the number of hours both of ground instruction and flight instruction that you're going to need, and probably fewer hours in the airplane, which will save you money. In fact, Jason Miller of the Finer Points podcast was just talking about this strategy in this week's episode. So it makes a lot of sense. In fact, his suggestion was for every hour in the airplane, spend 3 hours between flight lessons studying for the next flight lesson. Number 12, fly consistently so as not to lose any knowledge. When he says fly consistently, let me give you my guidelines. I think twice a week is really ideal if you can fly that often prior to getting to the point where you can solo. After you learn to solo, you can probably fly a little bit less frequently. I would say in general, the bare minimum, if you can afford it, is about once a week. If you fly less frequently than once a week, well, it's probably going to take more lessons and your total cost is going to go up. Number 13, join a flying club and take flying lessons from them. Flying clubs are often a cheaper way to rent airplanes, so if you can find a flying club of a few people that own one or more airplanes, you might find that as a less expensive way to get your pilot certificate. Plus, you can meet a whole bunch of nice people who can provide you coaching and help with learning to fly. 14, fly with pilot friends and watch how they fly. 15, chat with other pilots. You can do that online or in person. Number 16, this one was new to me. You can join a NOPE, N-O-P-E. That's a non-owner pilot exchange to practice. And the NOPE apparently is a setup where an aircraft non-owner helps to pay the operating cost of an individual who actually owns the airplane. In return, the non-owner, which would be you, gets to fly the airplane. 17, use flight simulators to get even more practice when you can't be in the plane. And we're going to be talking about flight simulators shortly when we talk to Kevin Meyers of PilotEdge later in the show. 18, ask your instructor on what you were doing for the next lesson so that you can study it ahead of time. 19, listen to aviation podcasts. Of course, we've got a great recommendation as to which one you should listen to. 20, this is great. Print a full-scale poster of the cockpit to practice finding things. So yes, that's really helpful if you study what the interior of the cockpit looks like before you get to the airplane. 21, practice flying in your seat. I call that chair flying. I always encourage people to, whenever they have some time, find their easy chair, close their eyes, visualize that they're flying the aircraft, and don't just visualize that everything is going right. Imagine that you're on final, but things aren't perfect. Maybe you have a crosswind. Visualize the aircraft blowing to one side of the center line, and then how you have to either crab the aircraft or do the low wing method, lower wing, and add some rudder so that you can track the center line and compensate for the crosswind. These kinds of things are almost as valuable as flying the airplane itself. So spend lots of time practicing flying in the comfort of your own home in your easy chair. Visualize what it's like to fly, and that will save you pilot training hours. 22, study, and of course, makes total sense. 23, use apps or videos for ground schools, and to that I will also add books. The FAA books are really excellent. In fact, all of them are available for free as PDFs from FAA.gov, so I would recommend you look for the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge and the Airplane Flying Handbook. You can also, of course, buy printed copies, but they are free if you're willing to read the PDF. 25, record your flight lessons. Lots of ways to do that. A lot of people think GoPro video camera is a good way to go, but it doesn't have to be video. 20 plus years ago when I was working on my CFI certificate, I brought along a cassette recorder and I recorded the audio from each of my flight lessons to get my CFI. And I would then go back and listen to those tapes later and also transcribe some of the points from the tapes that I wanted to remember. So recording your flight lessons can definitely reduce the number of hours you have to spend in the airplane. 26, always show up for your lessons. And to that I will add, don't cancel for dumb reasons. I had one pilot who canceled on extremely short notice because he decided to go buy a car that day. This gentleman already had a car, but he left me high and dry at the airport, without telling me until the very last minute. So yeah, be respectful. When you're scheduled to show up for a lesson, please show up, unless of course there's an emergency. And buying a car is not an emergency. 27, communicate what you are having trouble with your instructor. And having an open and honest and direct communication, a relationship where you have trust in your instructor really is paramount. If you don't have that kind of relationship with your CFI, it's not going to be as productive a learning relationship, and you might want to consider finding a different flight instructor with whom you feel that you can connect really well. So if you're struggling with anything, you ought to be able to let your CFI know, and he or she should then be able to help you. We are not mind readers, so it's important that you provide that kind of feedback. 28, choose a flight school with a good reputation. Well, to that I would say choose your CFI well. You might have only one flight school nearby, in which case you can't choose among flight schools, but often you can choose among flight instructors. So before you get very far into your flight training, you may want to either interview a couple flight instructors, you may want to take one flight lesson with a couple different flight instructors, find out who you mesh with well. You're going to be spending a lot of time shoulder to shoulder with that person, and you want to make sure that that's someone who you get along well with and who you trust and have a good relationship with. 29, take advantage of discounts and freebies. And I don't have a lot to add to that because there aren't tons of those, but you might be able to find some. 30, work hard. That's good advice for life as well, but especially for flying. Here's why. There are many things that you might choose to do in life, and if you screw them up, it's not going to be the end of the world. It might be embarrassing. It might cost you a little money, but if you screw up when you're flying, it could be the end of your life. So if you're going to be a pilot, either commit to being the best possible pilot you can, or please don't do it. There really is no in between. Well, there you have it, the 30 suggestions from DAG for reducing the cost of flight training. Now, DAG also interviewed a corporate pilot about how that pilot learned to fly. Unfortunately, in the recording, we can hear DAG quite clearly, but there was a severe echo on the pilot he recorded. And so today I'm going to be reading the part for the pilot. So you'll hear DAG ask the questions, and I'll read what the pilot said to DAG in the interview. Here's DAG's interview.
This is Michael Nelson. So what do you currently do?
I'm a pilot for a private corporation flying a Falcon 2000.
So when did you start flying?
I started to learn to fly in October of 1970.
Why did you decide to learn to fly?
Well, as I remember, when I was in the 8th or 9th grade, I decided that I wanted to be a pilot. So my whole thought process from that point on was, how can I be a pilot? And I thought I would go into the military and become a pilot, and that didn't work out. So when I got out of the military and got married, I didn't have any money to take flying lessons, but I still wanted to be a pilot. So my wife, Sharon, encouraged me to pursue my dreams. And at that time, we had a Hammond organ that I'd purchased and wasn't using it very much. And she said, why don't you sell that and try to get your private pilot's license? And so that's what I did. And that's kind of how I got started in it.
So after you got your private, did you just go straight through the pathway up to the commercial?
Yes, but it's more involved than that. Originally, I didn't have enough money to take the physical flying lessons, so I got the books. And I did all the book work and got my written exam passed because there's two portions of the license. There's a written examination and there's a practical examination. And what happens a lot of time is people will get so enamored with the actual flying part, they'll go out to the airport and jump in the airplane and start flying. Well, this is neat, but they don't do the book work. And so they've got all the hours built up they need to be able to take the practical test, but you can't take the practical test until the written is done.
So you took the written first?
I did the written first on all my licenses, my private, my commercial, my instrument rating. I did all that studying first so I wouldn't have to wait trying to get it done.
So was your first flying job flying for the company, or did you do something else?
My first flying job, God has blessed me tremendously. I didn't have to work at getting a flying job like a lot of pilots. A lot of pilots have a lot of different jobs trying to build enough time to do anything. What I did, I was working for the state of Michigan, and I built a house next to the man who was the chief pilot for a corporation. He knew I was trying to learn to fly, and at that time I already had my commercial and was working on my instrument rating and multi-engine rating. And the company that he worked for bought another plane, so he offered me a chance to go to work with very low time. I'm not sure those opportunities exist today because of insurance and everything the way business is done today. So my first flying job was with a company in Michigan, and I worked for them for 28 years until I retired.
Wow.
Yes, that's pretty much unheard of in corporate aviation. Airlines might be different, but corporate aviation, the job market fluctuates. Companies make money, they have airplanes, they lose money, they sell airplanes, and you're just kind of at the whim of whomever's running the corporation. But I was lucky to be able to work for Masco Corporation, and they treated their pilots and everybody good, and that was a great job for 28 years, and they had me retire when I was 60 years old. See, I didn't start flying professionally until I was 32, so pretty late in life, really.
Why did you decide to keep flying after you retired?
I have always wanted to fly, and the opportunity to fly presented itself. God gave me an opportunity to fly after I retired because when I retired, I was flying the same type of airplane that the current owner had at that time, and they needed someone for a backup pilot, a third pilot in case someone got sick or went on vacation. So I did part-time work for them, and when their chief pilot retired, the owner asked me if I'd keep flying for them full-time, and I said sure would. So God again provided an opportunity for me. I was working for the state of Michigan and had 10 years in the state of Michigan, and then my first flying job came along and I had to take a big cut in pay. And I came home and I was married, obviously, and had 2 children, and I told Sharon I have an opportunity to fly, but it means a big cut in pay and hardship for the family. She said, there's only one question you have to ask Nelson, and I said, what is that? And she says, do you want to be 60 and wish you had tried this?
And then, last question. What exactly do you do flying for a company?
Well, basically, you're responsible for the airplane, the flight planning. You're essentially moving people from point A to point B in a safe manner. And we run the airplane almost like an airline, except that we can't sell seats. There's just a myriad number of things that you have to do, checking on the weather, following up on maintenance issues, to making sure your health stays good, and then the physical flying part of it, too.
Yeah, thank you. And that was Michael Nelson on how he got into flying.
Well, my thanks to Dag for producing the interview, as well as for coming up with 30 ways to cut the cost of flight training. And Dag, if you apply the same kind of effort to your future flight training that you did for this little project here, I know you're going to be a great pilot and very successful in life. Thanks so much for contacting me and for listening to Aviation News Talk. Coming up next, we'll be talking with Kevin Meyers of PilotEdge, right here on the Aviation News Talk podcast. And now let me tell you a little bit about Kevin Meyers. Kevin is the Director of Marketing and also Director of Special Projects at PilotEdge. And he says that since 2011, PilotEdge has been revolutionizing flight simulators by adding the one element of which they are all missing, and that's live and professional air traffic control. Now here's our conversation with Kevin Meyers. Well, Kevin, welcome to Aviation News Talk. It is great to have you here today.
Thank you. Really glad to be here, Max. Thanks for having me on.
Well, to set the mood, let's first run a short video from last year's SimVenture 2020 that I found in your website.
Runway Cessna, beautiful rock. Continue on that left base 36 right. Runway 36 right, clear to land on or after the red square. You guys are lined up really good for the runways. Red Cessna, 36 right, you're clear to land, red square. Again, once you land, high-speed taxi all the way down to the end, all the way down to the end. Blue and white Moody, you're putting it down on the purple. Blue and white Cherokee all the way down to the yellow dot. Keep it in the air, keep it in the air. In the air, blue and white Cherokee all the way down to that yellow dot. Traffic lands behind you. Nice job, guys. You guys are looking really good. Red and white Cessna, you're landing 36 right. Do not turn for 36 left. You're clear to land 36 right on or after the red square. Again, you guys are...
Wow, and that is just so realistic. But it's actually a simulation that pilots can participate in this year. Where did the idea come from last year for SimVenture, the first one, 2020?
So PilotEdge has been around for, I guess at the time last year, it was about eight to 8.5 years. And we'd never done anything. We run monthly events. We'd never done anything this well built out and this kind of realistic, and everything's realistic, but this, I guess, extreme on a realism level. And so I approached Keith, the founder and CEO of PilotEdge, and I said, I think we've got the infrastructure, we've got the knowledge to hold an Oshkosh event. And I think that our users would love it. I think that potential new users would love it. And this was, mind you, back in about February. So this is really before the world took a turn upside down. And then, come March, come April, the world starts really changing. May 1st, I think it was, the EAA canceled AirVenture. And that was really, we were already planning to do something, but it was the cancellation of AirVenture that was like, oh man, like this is on us now. It is really all with everyone locked in their homes, and you can't go out, you can't do anything, you can't go to Oshkosh this year. It's on us to provide people a way to still be able to do this somehow. And so we got with the EAA last year, and we also got with NACA, the National Air Traffic Control Association, both of which we collaborated with, and we were able to hold our first ever SimVenture Oshkosh event, which went very well. It was over the course of 4 days. And so last year really had a theme of sentimental and kind of bringing everyone together. We were actually a part of EAA's Spirit of Aviation Week, which was the virtual Oshkosh, essentially, that EAA put on. So they had a bunch of workshops and everything. We were on the calendar as the flying event for your flight simulator. And so, it went so well. It was, how could we not do it again? Especially because we were planning to do it anyways before the world changed. So fast forward again to, beginning of this year or so. And we're, like I said, we're already planning to do it again. So at this point, it's okay, well, what do we do differently now? What are we geared towards? Well, now we're more so gearing it towards, one more thing I'll say actually about the first of 2020 was that we did it during Spirit of Aviation Week, which was the week Oshkosh would have been. Fast forward to 2021 coming up this year. And one of the things that we want to do differently is instead of kind of taking a sentimental approach, we're taking a training approach. And we want to be able to prepare pilots to actually fly to AirVenture. So therefore, we're not going to do it the exact week of AirVenture. We're going to do it about a week and a half before, July 14th through 18th. And so there's nothing else like this. If you're a first-time AirVenture pilot, you're going up there for the first time, or even if you're a seasoned AirVenture pilot, you haven't flown the Fisk Arrival for at least 2 years. And, you can watch, there are fantastic videos on YouTube. Obviously, there are guides and a lot of great research, and people have been doing it for, 50 years. But now you actually have an opportunity to practice in a practical setting ahead of time with the actual air traffic controllers who are going to be at the show on the ground with the radios, making you rock your wings. And you can do that a week and a half ahead of time from the comfort of your flight simulator. And so that's really the aspect, the approach we're taking this year is a training approach. And now that's not to say that if you're not flying to AirVenture and if you're not even a pilot, maybe you're just an aviation enthusiast, that's not to say that we're not going to let you participate. We would love to have you participate. This event is for pilots and enthusiasts alike. As long as you are a proficient enthusiast or you're willing to learn ahead of time, we will gladly have you at the event. And it will be a lot of fun. I had the opportunity to fly the Fisk Arrival last year during the event. And boy, it seemed so real. Just to have those controllers having us rock our wings and you're seeing all the traffic around you, it was phenomenal.
Well, I think that's the thing that I noticed as I looked at some of the videos that were produced from last year is just how realistic every aspect of this appears. And I think there are many pilots who, like me, for example, may go to Oshkosh but never fly in, because for me from the West Coast, it's just easy to come in commercially. And yet here's an opportunity for me to try that out, as you mentioned, for flight simmers who may never actually fly a real airplane. Great opportunity to them, but especially for people who plan to fly it. This, to me, looks like the real experience. So we can half ahead of time, people can simulate what they're going to be doing when they actually fly to AirVenture.
That's our goal. And Max, unfortunately, every AirVenture, it seems like there are at least maybe one or two crashes. So hopefully, if we can get through to hundreds, if not thousands of pilots who are planning to fly into AirVenture and make the event that much safer, make the pilots that much more proficient, then we've done our job. And not only is it designed to be a fun event and get a bunch of people, but we are truly pushing the aviation safety aspect here, and we want people to feel comfortable flying into AirVenture. We don't want people to be nervous. We want them to feel like they've done it before, whether they have or not.
I was really impressed, especially by the graphics. Certainly, simulators have come a long way in recent years, but you've gone beyond that. It looks to me like you've done some custom scenery. Tell us about that, because it really feels like you're at AirVenture.
I think the custom scenery is really the icing on the cake to everything. Having the actual air traffic controllers volunteer on the PilotEdge network is amazing as well. But to be able to look and see all the people on the ground, or all the tents, or the static airplanes, and when you're coming up those railroad tracks and at the airport starts coming into view, and you see hundreds and thousands of just Cessnas and Pipers and what have you, and the North 40 there, and it's like, wow. Like this is cool. You get goosebumps. And then meanwhile, you're hearing ATC talk, 1,000 miles a minute. So yeah, the scenery is really a key aspect, because it really just it immerses you all that much more. And so we have built out custom scenery with all the simulators on the market. That's Microsoft. We'll start from oldest to newest, Microsoft Flight Simulator X, which is about a 16-year-old simulator now, which we will still support. Lockheed Martin's Prepared. And then there's X-Plane. And then the brand new one, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. And so for all four of those different simulators, we have custom scenery. And now X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 are certainly the best custom scenery of those four sims, but they're all terrific. They all give you just a fun feeling of really being there and getting to look around, see a bunch of airplanes and a lot of static objects. It's really neat.
Well, I was excited in one video to see that the pilot who made the video was taxiing behind the Ford Trimotor that's owned by EAA that they give rides in, and then I watched it take off. And I'm lucky enough to have actually flown that from the right seat many years ago. So it was really special to see that level of customization that's occurred there. Tell us about the different kinds of airplanes that people could choose to fly to AirVenture in. And do I understand last year that some people kind of showed up in unusual airplanes that wouldn't typically fly to AirVenture?
So what's one of the key differences actually between last year and this year? So last year we did have a predetermined list of airplanes that people had to fly. It was about a 20 or 25. I mean, it was a good sized list. Really, all of the primary common general aviation planes were on there. And then some of the more unusual ones, probably the biggest one was the Pipistrel Panthera. It's a lot more popular in Europe. Also the Robin, the DR Robin. It's again, kind of more European popular. The reason it's popular on the simulator is because there are third-party companies who have made very good flight models for those airplanes. So, but then this year, one of the big differences is that we are allowing people to fly any airplane as long as it is a fixed-wing, non-turbojet aircraft. We will take you. And so that means also another addition is we are simulating the warbird arrival as well. So if your airplane is a turboprop, or if it is just cannot go as slow as the 135 knots, which is the higher of the two categories for the fixed drive, we got 90 knots and 1,800 feet, or 135 knots and 2,300 feet. If you can't meet either of those restrictions, then you'll be on the warbird arrival with the turboprops. And that one is a very different style of arrival, but we wanted to offer that to people as well. I think that'll mainly appeal to more towards the enthusiasts, but it'll just make the event all that much better by having all the different diversity of traffic and a different flow as well.
So this will differ from a lot of flight sim work that people do in that I won't be able to fly a 747 to Oshkosh?
Correct. No jets, and then no helicopters as well. We will likely have several PilotEdge staff members flying tour helicopters around the grounds, just again to provide that aspect of realism where you're seeing the helicopters, 3 or 4 of them at a time, just buzzing over every 30 seconds. And that was really going back to the tri-motor. That was really the main purpose for that too. So the tri-motors were actually flown by PilotEdge staff members as well. So you could fly a tri-motor, I suppose, on the warbird arrival, but we're not going to let you go just fly the tour route in a tri-motor. So those were flown by staff members, again, just to immerse everyone more in the experience. That was kind of a real last minute call by Keith Smith, the founder and CEO, right before the event. He was able to find a tri-motor model for the sim, and he made it all work. So that was really neat.
Well, so anybody who's ever flown to AirVenture knows that one of the key pieces of preparation that's required for all pilots is to read the Nodem. And I think as pilots, we tend to think of Nodems as very short, little brief descriptions. The AirVenture Nodem is not that way at all. I think it probably runs about 30 pages or something like that. And you've got your own Nodem. Tell us about that.
Absolutely, yes. So the Nodem is, as you say, it's a critical part. These are not. You're not going to find the FISC arrival, which, if listeners aren't familiar, that is the main arrival for your small GA. If you're flying a Skyhawk in there, you'll be on the FISC arrival. You're not going to find that in your jet plates. You're not going to find that on the FAA charts. You're only going to find the FISC arrival in the EAA. And so we've taken the EAA Nodem and we've made our own version that is it really mirrors the EAA one. The reason we can't use the EAA one, though, is that there are a good amount of, I call them simisms, that are in there. And now that's not to say that it's unrealistic. I don't want people to tune out and say, oh, okay, I thought this was great, but it's not. It's the things that we include in our Nodem that obviously EAA wouldn't, is how to load up. For instance, everyone has clear skies and 10-mile visibility. And that gives everyone a level playing field. There's no wind, because the last thing we need is for someone to have a strong tailwind and someone to have a strong headwind, because that's one of the issues we run into on the simulators, is that the sims, sometimes the weather engines don't match up to each other. So we have everyone at a level playing field. It's always a beautiful day at SimVenture, is what we tell the controllers. And it's clear skies and clear in a million. So that's one of the few simisms that are in the Nodem that basically tells the pilots how to load up, where to load up. There are a few little setting things in your simulator as far as the graphic settings. You have to have a certain, you got to be like low or higher. Basically, if you can't be running like the complete bare minimums. We don't really ask for that much, but so there are little things in there. But other than that, everything mirrors the EAA Nodem. We've taken screenshots from the EAA Nodem, put them into ours. It's a lot of the verbiage for everything is pretty much cut and paste from the EAA Nodem. So we really went above and beyond to mirror the procedures as well as we could. We're lucky enough that the technology of the PilotEdge network, combined with the flight simulator programs that are out there, allow people to see the traffic. So you will see the guy a half mile in front of you. In addition, we're lucky enough that third-party applications such as ForeFlight is compatible with flight simulators. So if you're a ForeFlight subscriber, you can use your iPad or your iPhone to keep track of where the traffic is. There are a few other options as well. If you're not a ForeFlight subscriber, there are other options we have that are also in the Nodem. That's kind of another thing that we threw in the Nodem there to help the pilots out, because seeing the traffic in the sim is probably, I will say, actually, it's definitely harder than spotting it in the real airplane, especially depending on your monitor resolution. And Oshkosh being what it is, seeing traffic is very, very important. So we want to make sure that's as easy as possible for people. So we do strongly encourage that people use some sort of third-party moving map, or even the PilotEdge online map has just map.pilotedge.net has a moving map that you can follow along to. So even if you don't have any of those, ForeFlight or anything fancy like that, if you have anything at all, a tablet or a phone or a second computer, you can go to map.pilotedge.net and follow along there.
And the traffic that you might be following or seeing, or that's following you, for the most part, that's other people who are participating in SimVenture?
100%. Yes. The only exception to that would be those tour helicopters and the tri-motors that I mentioned. But as far as everyone, there's no AI traffic. It's 100% real. So in 2020, we had nearly 1,100 arrivals throughout the 4 days that we ran SimVenture. We ran for about 3 to 4 hours a day. We had 1,100 arrivals throughout that week, and that was all 100% real people.
Well, I think what also adds to the realism is that these are real people. Therefore, they're going to be real mistakes, both on the parts of the pilots participating as well as the controllers.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because I was really in charge of I don't want to say training the controllers. It was more of a familiarization as to how to do this, on PilotEdge and through that way. And by the way, the controllers absolutely see the airplanes rock their wings. It's not like they have to pretend to see it. If you don't rock, then they're gonna move on, or they're going to say, hey, come on, like rock your wings. But I worked with the controllers to get them familiar with kind of how to do it on PilotEdge. And, I told them last year, because we really didn't have an idea of how well this was going to go. We did a few small scale runs. We did a decently sized run, but, we certainly hadn't gone full scale. And we were just like, well, let's just kind of see what happens. And so I told them, we might get some people that just do weird things. Or for instance, on the Fisk arrival, when you get over the town of Fisk, they'll either put you up the railroad tracks or they'll turn you down Fisk Avenue, which is about a 90 heading down this one east-west road. And out of Fisk, there's also Highway 44, which is a very inviting road to follow for those who get assigned Fisk Avenue. And so we were noticing in the small scale test a little bit that some people were following Highway 44. So I told the controllers, I said, we've been seeing this a lot in the sim. It looked very inviting over Fisk Avenue. They said, oh, trust me, we see this all the time. They were not surprised at that at all. So it was a little bit funny that the mistakes that we were seeing, even just from our small scale testing, which is mainly internal, were actually the same mistakes that they were used to seeing for real. So yes, to that point, it's great training for the controllers to get them kind of revved up and in the mindset after having not done this now for 2 years, right? Because for those who might not be familiar, these controllers do not work at Oshkosh. They don't live at Oshkosh. They do not work in Oshkosh Tower 51 weeks out of the year. They, as NACA FAA controllers, they put in a bid and they are selected to go up. I think it's about 80 or 90 controllers who go every year. They're selected to go up to Oshkosh for that 1 week a year, and they work the show, and then that's it. And they go back and they work wherever tower they came from. So, and typically it's a lot of returning controllers. It's not just usually a do it once and be done with it thing. And the controllers love it. And that's what's so cool. And that they go there on their own time and they volunteer to go to AirVenture, similar to how they're volunteering to do it on PilotEdge. So it's just a really great group of controllers who are all incredibly passionate about aviation. And you can really tell that. And so they don't mind if especially on the PilotEdge version of for SimVenture, they don't mind if you make a mistake. It's good training for them too, to be able to react and resequence and whatever has to happen.
All of which adds to the realism. So I'm curious, if I were going to fly to AirVenture in SimVenture, where do I start from?
So you can start really wherever you want. So the PilotEdge coverage area is pretty much the western half of the United States. If you take the west side of Texas and kind of draw a line northbound, it's a little jagged out there, but it's pretty much the western half of the United States. So on a typical day, PilotEdge does not cover Wisconsin. Obviously, we make an exception for the SimVenture event, although there is no radar controller. So you're not going to get flight following. You can't fly an IFR. We don't even allow any IFR ops at all. That could be something, down the road for future SimVentures, but last year nor this year are we allowing any IFR operations. And so if you wanted to depart from, say, Van Nuys, California, you could leave Van Nuys. You'd have full PilotEdge coverage all the way to the PilotEdge boundary, which is, about the middle of the United States. And then they'd terminate you. It'd basically just be class golf airspace. And then you could fly the rest on your own. We did see some people do that last year. We suspect some people will do that this year again, kind of make a fun several-week journey out of it, similar to how people would do it for real. The majority of people, though, will start at just surrounding airports in the Oshkosh area, the most common being Fond du Lac. Fond du Lac KFLD is basically the offloader for Oshkosh. If Oshkosh gets full, or if the air show is going on, the daily air show, people will go to Fond du Lac. And it's about 10 to 15 miles south of the airport, just a real small, it's actually uncontrolled field, but they do put up a temporary tower during AirVenture week. We will be putting up a temporary tower at Fond du Lac as well, so people can begin their flight there. That's a really good kind of way to start. Just start there. You head out west to Fisk. Well, actually, you'll go further than that. You'll go out to one of the starting points on the Fisk arrival and join the arrival from there. But we expect a lot of traffic there. But really, people can start wherever they want. And I think that's really part of the big experience is we do expect people to fly in from all over the country and similarly depart, towards the end of the event and fly back to wherever they were. And just, it's completely up to the user as to what level of realism they want to take it there.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. For folks who don't already have a simulator at home, tell me about kind of the minimum set of software and equipment that one would need from a simulator standpoint. Then we'll get to PilotEdge in a moment.
Sure, Max. Well, there's still plenty of time to get set up with a flight simulator. Don't think, oh, well, I don't have a flight simulator. This would have been so great. You've got several weeks, and that's really all you need. As far as the minimums go, the 4 flight simulators that we support, like I said, Flight Simulator X, Prepared, and then Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, which is the brand new one, and X-Plane 11. Of those 4, the easiest one to get set up with is probably going to be X-Plane 11. And the reason I say that is because Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, while they also offer an online download, it requires a pretty beefy computer. So if you don't already have maybe a gaming computer or just a really powerful computer for whatever you do, you're likely not going to have much luck with Flight Sim 2020 on a short-term basis if you don't have time to go out and buy a really nice computer. The great thing about X-Plane 11 is that they even offer a free download. So you can actually download and see if it's going to work on your computer at all. Honestly, X-Plane 11 is pretty good in that it doesn't require a whole lot to work on. I wouldn't say that it works on necessarily like a low-grade Microsoft Surface tablet, but maybe even one of the higher-grade ones, one of the upper scale models, you might be able to get it running on that. But test it out. You can download the free trial, x-plane.com. And then as far as other minimums go, probably just have a joystick is really the lowest you need. Certainly, if you just go to Google and type in home flight simulator, you'll find some incredible things out there. Literally, almost everything is out there for home flight sims. But if you're just trying to get set up quick and on a budget, you can go down to Walmart or Amazon, get a $30 Logitech joystick, and you're up and running. That'll give you plenty of control of your aircraft. We would certainly ask that you have control of your aircraft prior to flying in SimVenture. We wouldn't encourage the first time you load up your sim to be during SimVenture. We do some flights in the pattern, practice flying straight and level. We also encourage people to use the autopilot because straight and level flight can actually be a little challenging in the sim since you don't have your inner ear telling you if you're slowly climbing or descending or hitting a bump or what have you. So yes, just be familiar with your sim, and then we'll be glad to have you. But if you have any questions on getting set up with flight simulators, the PilotEdge community and the PilotEdge network has a lot of great resources. You can just reach out to them on social media at PilotEdge ATC, via direct message or right on the wall on Facebook, whatever you want to there. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Reach out PilotEdge ATC, and we'll try and get you set up real quick here so you can get ready for SimVenture.
Well, and the last piece that people are going to need is PilotEdge. Tell us about that. What does it cost, and how do people get that? Yeah,
so real quick, so PilotEdge is a service. It's an extra for flight simulators. Everyone out there who has ever flown or has attempted flying or knows someone knows how important it is to talk on the radio. It's nearly a requirement at almost, certainly all towered airports, and it's obviously always a good idea. Mic fright is one of the biggest challenges that pilots have to overcome. And you're not going to overcome that by hitting buttons on a keyboard. So what PilotEdge does is they provide live air traffic control for your flight simulator. That means that you can load up on your sim, you can load up a flight, you connect to the PilotEdge network, and you are immediately immersed into the radar scopes of the controllers who are working on the other side. You're also seeing the other traffic. If you load up right next to someone else on the ramp, then you're going to see them. So the PilotEdge controllers, they all work for the company. Some of them, it's a mixture of FAA student controllers, former controllers, and they have had some current ones. I don't know if they do have any current ones at the moment, but there are some people who just do it because they know a lot about air traffic control. Now, regardless of the level of controller, they're all trained at very high standards. The training process is anywhere between 3 to 6 months, and they don't take people fresh either. You need to have you need to have some sort of level of some sort of background in air traffic to even really apply and get hired by PilotEdge, because it would just be too much to train someone from the ground up. So, from a standpoint of a professional service, they have to be 100% on. They have to know the book, and they do. They get trained by the book. The 7110.65 is the FAA document, the FAA handbook for air traffic control. It's publicly available, which is convenient. So they can just use that, and they reference all that for phraseology, procedures, what have you. As far as the cost of PilotEdge, it does come at a small cost because the controllers are paid. Like I said, it's their job. That's how they can can guarantee the quality and coverage, mind you. So the controllers are always there 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. Pacific time. So it starts at $19.95 a month. That's for one of the coverage areas. Then you can get the full coverage area. So the one of the coverage area being either the Los Angeles Center portion, so basically the lateral confines of what LA Center owns. The other coverage area being basically the entire rest of the Western United States. Or you can get both for $34.95. You can also sign up for an annual plan, which cuts that by about 25% as well. The last thing I'll say about pricing, though, for SimVenture, and really for actually PilotEdge ever, is everyone gets a free trial. Everyone gets 5 hours of connectivity time within a 2-week period. So that means that for SimVenture, if you're thinking, I don't think PilotEdge is really for me, but I'd like to still try SimVenture, sounds really fun, you can actually do that on your free trial. So if you sign up, just make sure you sign up within 2 weeks of the event starting, because your trial will end 2 weeks after you sign up. And don't connect to the network and just sit there for a while, because the second you connect, that 5 hours of connectivity time is ticking. So it's either 5 hours or 2 weeks, whatever happens first. And so you can do that on your free trial. And certainly PilotEdge hopes that, if you like it, you continue to be a user and realize the benefit of the service as well.
Well, the dates appear to be Wednesday, July 14th through Sunday, July 18th, specific 3-hour blocks of time on each of those days. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. This has really been informative and sounds like it's going to be a whole lot of fun.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, hoping to see a lot of your listeners out there, and it's going to be a great time.
And my thanks to Kevin Meyers for coming on the show and telling us all about SimVenture 2021. You can find out more about it by going out on the web to pilotedge.net/SimVenture. And I got to tell you, it sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. I'm thinking about buying a joystick, getting an X-Plane and PilotEdge and trying this out. So if you want to fly in formation with me, maybe we'll consider doing that. I wonder if they'll let us use the Vision Jet on the Warbird's arrival. That would be a heck of a lot of fun. By the way, you can see the video version of the interview we just did about PilotEdge if you're a PayPal supporter at the $20 level a month. And that includes a lot of video from SimVenture 2020, as well as other B-roll that I've added to the video. If you'd like to support the show and see that and all the many other bonus videos that I've posted, it's very easy to do. Just go out to aviationnewstalk.com/awesome, sign up at the $20 a month level or above. You can also sign up at the $8 a month level, in which case you'll get our show notes along with the cut stories that we didn't have time to cover in the news. This week we've got 10 stories that we had to cut that did not fit into the news. You can also donate via PayPal. You can make that either a one-time donation or a monthly donation by going out to aviationnewstalk.com/PayPal. And you don't even need a PayPal account. You can just use a credit card to donate that way. And my thanks to people who've signed up in the last 2 weeks. We've got 4 new supporters, 3 on Patreon. Those include Brett Chillicott, who signed up at the $20 a month level, and 2 people who've added their pledges up to the $20 a month level. They include Andre Dannon and Jan Squillis, who I've met before. Hello, Jan. And we also had a one-time donation via PayPal of $189 from Anonymous. My thanks to you, sir, for your very kind donation. And I want to let you know that we have a great lineup of shows coming up. I've already been booking guests for the next several shows, so stick around. I think we're going to have a lot of fun this summer. Please, if you will, share this show with your friends so that they can join in on the fun as well. Just click on the share button and then follow up with them and ask them to either click on the follow or the subscribe button for whatever podcast player they're listening to us in. So until next time, fly safely, have fun, and keep the blue side up.